So tonight, we're shifting the format a little bit. So we have a one speaker workshop that I'm really excited to dive into, which is going to leave us a little more time for some of the breakout discussions in groups, which will be the second portion, where we kind of crowdsource different topics, whatever's on our mind, and then kind of unconference style, we'll go to the topics and break out into discussion groups. So with that said, we'll just jump right into it. Our speaker today is a good friend, Gregg Clunis. He's an awesome personal development nerd, runs a really successful podcast called Tiny Leaps. That's over 100,000 downloads. Just incredible content around personal development. And tonight he's going to be talking about how a practical approach to kind of changing your life. So it's also not even just going to be a speech, but there'll actually be a workshop component where we'll really kind of deconstruct some of the barriers in our life and how we can kind of refine our approach towards getting what we want out of life. So with that said, Gregg, take it away. Warm welcome.
Can you check if that's recording?
Yes, it is.
It is?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So thank you so much for having me. I just want to share really quickly my own experience with PDN. I haven't been able to make it to as many events as I would like to, but one of the things that I love about this community is just having it in the back of my mind. So I'm introverted. I tend to go to work, go home, work more, and go to sleep. And knowing that when I need it, when I need that community, I can come to these events, like having that is just amazing. So thank you guys for putting that together. So today I want to talk about how to change your life. But for the majority of the room who have absolutely no idea who I am, my name is Gregg Clunis. I am a content creator. I am currently a product design consultant at NASDAQ. I do podcast consulting for brands like ADP. And I created and host the podcast, Tiny Leaps, Big Changes. And a little bit about the show. So I created it because I was getting frustrated with personal development as a whole. So I felt that this thing that I personally love, and I know all of you guys love, was turning into this just fluffy garbage that really helps you to do nothing. It's become about funny quotes and Instagram pictures and just great statements like follow your passion without the how do you do that part. And so I launched this show to talk about what can you do next Tuesday in order to start making changes that may not have an effect for 10 years and being okay with that. So at the end of every episode, I leave my listeners with this quote that all big changes come from the tiny leaps you take every day. And I chose that because it's sort of the perfect roundup of everything that I believe that pushed me to start the show in the first place. But my problem with it is that it sounds good and it's a nice reminder and it's a good thing to think about, but it isn't very instructional. And so you hear the quote and you think about the day-to-day activities, but it doesn't tell you how do you identify what those day-to-day activities should be. It doesn't tell you how do you actually move from point A to point B. And so my purpose with this talk, with the book that's launching January 2019, and with all future episodes of the show, is to focus more on that instructional piece. And for today's purposes, I came up with a sort of 3-step framework that, using the power of hindsight, I now realize has actually played a major role in my life that I'll get into in a second. So those 3 steps are identify what you want, audit your current situation, and then change your daily behaviors, which will eventually change your situation. So I'm going to jump into each of those in a second, but first, this is the island of Jamaica. So I was born in Jamaica. I grew up there, lived there until I was 7, and then my parents and I and my sister moved to the United States. And something I've been thinking about for the past 17 or however long years that I've been here has just been, what did they have to go through in order to get me here? So for many of you who don't know, Jamaica is considered a third world country. My parents were not doing super well there, and the economy had just crashed back in 2000 or 99. And so really bad situation that they left the country in, and it's still not in a great place, but better. And so I just keep asking myself, what did they have to go through in order to pack up their entire family, move us to a totally different country where they had zero connections and zero experiences, no money saved, and just not disrupt our lives in any major way. And so that's what led me to these 3 steps. And so that first step, they had to figure out what it is that they wanted. And for them, that was to move their family to the US and create a comfortable place for us to find opportunity. And by us, I mean myself and my sister. So they sat down and figured out, what is it that I want? And that was it for them. So now we're gonna jump into a quick activity. I want you guys to pull out your phones or a piece of paper if you have it on you. And we're going to basically just figure out what it is that we want. But there's a specific way we're gonna go about that. Because the problem with this question, what do you want, is that it's very broad. It's really difficult to answer because it can apply to anything in your life. So if you say, what do you want? Well, what do you need? Which part of my life do you need? And so for the show, I came up with what I call your 6 pillars of life. And so in my opinion, every single person's life breaks down into their finances, their nutrition, their career, their relationships, their emotional health, and their fitness. And so if you focus, instead of what do I want, you focus in on one of those 6 pillars, it becomes a lot easier. For example, what do I want for my fitness? Maybe you want to lose weight, maybe you want a 6-pack, maybe you want to bench more. What do I want for my relationships? Maybe you, like Justin Bieber, just want to find somebody to love, or maybe you want to be single, or whatever it is. Just narrowing down to that specific area of your life and then asking the question, what do you want? So as an example, I'm going to focus on finances. So I want to create 11 sources of income, and each of those sources should use the principles of leverage to give me more than what I'm putting into it. So that's my clear goal, and I want you guys to take a minute, 45 seconds to a minute, and just pick one of those areas, I'll go back to it, where you feel like, okay, I want this thing in this area.
Can you read the sections out loud?
So it's your fitness, your nutrition, your finances, your career, your relationships, and your emotional health. And spirituality falls under emotional health, in my opinion. So we'll just hold a second for you guys to go through that. How are we doing? Does everyone have some general idea? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes.
Cool beans. All right, so let's jump back into my parents' story. So as I said, they started with that first step. What do I want? And for them, that was to pick up, move their family to a new country, and create opportunity for us. But the second thing they had to do is figure out what their situation was. Because the problem with personal development, one of the things I have an issue with, is you can talk about what you want all the time, and you can look at people who maybe have that, but context matters. Your current situation matters. And so if you're trying to change your life and move towards this thing by following everyone else's directions without having the context of where they were, it's just not going to work. So for them, they made this audit that shouldn't be positive or negative. You shouldn't view it as this is a good thing or a bad thing. It should just be this is reality. And so for them, they didn't have much money in savings, if any. They had very few connections in the US. I think they had maybe 3 family members total. They had a 2-parent household. They had stuff that they could sell to sort of live off of. And my dad had the opportunity to get a job picking apples, which not a great opportunity, but that's the reality. So we're going to jump back into our activity and just sort of audit our own personal situations based on the goal that we just sort of identified. So back to my example, I want to create 11 streams of income for myself. This is my current situation. So I have a small audience. I currently have 3 streams of income. I have a good overall income that I can utilize. I have valuable skills and experiences that could lead to more income. I don't have much time to work with on a day-to-day basis. I have a small team of 3 people, and I don't have the skills or knowledge to build or maintain 11 streams at once. And so that's the situation I'm in, neither good nor bad, just what the reality is. Yes?
How did you come up with the number 11?
So it's based on Grant Cardone's recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, so in a lot of his books and articles, he talks about 11 streams being sort of that source of if any one of them drops off, you're not hurting too bad. And so that's been the goal based on that.
Just a safe number.
Yep.
That's
So take another 30 seconds, just come up with 2 specific realities that you're faced with that might be interesting and relatable to the goal that you came up with.
I think they should be more challenge focused or just general.
It should just be, this is my life. This is how I spend my time. This is the behaviors and habits that I currently have. This is the money that I have. Like whatever your goal was, all of the factors related to that. And remember, neither good nor bad, just the reality. Move ahead in just a second. Cool. So, back to my parents' story. They decided on their goal. They want to move to the US, create comfort for their children. They identified what their situation was. And then the next step is, how do we change the situation? What are the behaviors that we can engage in that will allow us to get closer to this goal? And so for them, what they decided to do, my dad left. So in the year 2000, from let's say February until December, I didn't see my dad, my mom didn't see my dad, my sister didn't see my dad. He packed up, moved to the US, and took a job as an apple picker in a farm somewhere. And he lived in this horrible trailer that had no heat and like holes in the wall. Like I didn't have the pleasure of visiting, thankfully, but I've seen pictures and it was a horrible place. Meanwhile, my mom stayed in Jamaica. She was a stay-at-home mom, and so in order to make ends meet, make sure we could eat, like my dad sent money home, but he didn't have, you don't get paid that much picking apples. So she sold stuff. She sold furniture, TVs, like things that we had in order to sort of stretch it and make things work. And then finally, after 8 months or so, my dad, through meeting somebody else on this field, I was able to get a job as a line worker at a juice bottling plant up in Poughkeepsie, New York. And it wasn't enough to get an apartment and move us in and have an amazing life, but it was enough to show that, okay, now something has started. So they audited their original situation. They didn't have connections, they didn't have the money, they didn't have anything that would allow them to just pick up their life and move, and made that tough call of, this is the goal we want, this is the situation that we're faced with, and the only way we can make that goal happen is by separating and one of them going and starting to create those connections and putting those roots, and one of them staying and taking care of us. And so back to that activity, if I look at my current situation around creating those 11 streams, so I'm not going to go through the entire list again, but one of the big factors that might get in my way is not having the skills or knowledge to build and maintain those streams. And so if I were to sit down and think, what can I do given my current situation, I can prioritize learning how to do that. I can go to networking events, I can find people that have done it and speak to them, I can read more books about it, I can prioritize gaining the knowledge and skills that I don't currently have. I can take the money that I'm making from these other streams and figure out where to put them in order to create more streams. I can invest deeper into my team and make sure that I'm utilizing their time to sort of fill the gap that I don't have in time. And so if I look at my situation, there are ways that I can make it happen that are based on the context of my reality. And so that's what I want you guys to do right now is take that goal, take the reality that you just did, I hope, an honest audit of, and figure out one thing that you could do that is a specific, actionable thing that you can prioritize to start moving towards that. For the record, when you sit down and actually do this, it should take you more than 30 seconds. Awesome. So, the thing with this framework, with these 3 steps of figuring out what it is you want, giving an honest audit of where you currently are, what your reality is with no judgments, and figuring out, okay, given that reality, what actions can I take? The real benefit of it is it gives us clarity. The number one reason why most people don't achieve any of the things they want is simply because they don't know what it is. We come to these events and we read the books and we watch the talks and listen to the podcasts, but many of us don't take the time to ask ourselves that honest question of what is it that I want? And when we do, we ask the broad version of that question. We just say the general, what is it that I want? Rather than specifically, what do I want my body to look like? What do I want my relationship to look like? How much money would I like to make? And so using this framework and getting specific with those 6 pillars allows you to get real clarity around that thing that you're trying to move towards. The second thing it allows us to do is put a little bit of realism on it. And so as I mentioned before, the problem with personal development is that we're all looking to everyone else for the solutions on how to change our life, but we don't have the same context that they have. And so if I were to try to follow everything that Gary Vaynerchuk says or follow everything that Grant Cardone says or any of the people that I follow, it just wouldn't work for me. They have different backgrounds. They have different places that they came from and different advantages that maybe I don't have and disadvantages that I don't have. And so the context matters, and by using that second step of honestly auditing where you are, what your reality is, you allow yourself to put your personal change in context with where you are. And then finally, it gives us something to focus on. It makes it practical. Because if you can figure out what you want and you can figure out what's stopping you from getting there or what might be possibly in your way or what good things you're doing to get there, then you can double down on the good things, cut out the bad things, and do that every single day. And that's how you start to create change in your life, is by taking those daily specific actions towards a specific thing. It's not foolproof. Unfortunately, you still have to take the actions, you still have to do the activities, you still have to think about it, and it's certainly not unique. Like, I'm not going to stand here and say that I came up with some amazing 3-step formula to change your life forever, but what I can say is that it works. And it works, and I know it works because I'm here in the US, I've had the experiences I've had, I've been able to go to college, I've been able to launch a podcast, I've been able to speak to thousands of people around the world because my parents used this. Not knowingly, of course, this is the benefit of hindsight, me looking back at what their process was, but they identified what they wanted. They were honest about where they were instead of trying to pack up and jump ship and move without having any sort of understanding of whether or not they could sustain that. And then they made difficult decisions and cut out things they cared about in order to make that happen. And it works because the truth of the matter is that that quote I gave earlier, all big changes come from the tiny leaps you take every day, that works. That is real, and I fully, wholeheartedly believe it. And the lucky thing for us is that if the tiny leaps you take every day are what create big changes, the stuff you do every day is controllable. The stuff you decide to do or not do is a decision you can make and have some sense of control over, which means that the big change you eventually get or don't get is also within your control. And so with all of that said, I've been Gregg Clunis. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for participating. And remember that all big changes come from the tiny leaps you take every day. And if anyone has any questions or would like to share their activity, happy to listen, happy to answer, happy to connect on Instagram. Every single platform, every podcast app, website, everywhere. So just find me and subscribe.
So we should have time for about 2 or 3 questions.
Cool. Anybody? Yes.
From your own experience, do you usually focus on several areas you want to have some change, or on one project? Or does that really depend on kind of your personality and how you work on stuff like that?
So first, what's your name?
Gisela.
Gisela?
Yes.
It's very nice to meet you. For me, I view those 6 pillars as the areas you're trying to keep in balance, with the full knowledge that none of it will ever be in balance. Because in order to pursue any one area, other things have to sort of fall off. And so the goal for me is to maintain the knowledge that these are the 6 areas that matter, and these are the areas that I want to make sure don't completely fall off. But it's always going to be one that you put your focus towards. Yeah.
I made an observation during that talk about the things about assessing like your current reality that I thought was interesting when you included, for example, not having the skills as far as maintaining or creating 11 streams of income, which in my, like, I didn't really look at that as something that would be part of your current situation, because it's like 1 out of a million things that currently aren't there, right? So it's almost like you're already including something in like your current situation that is not part of your current situation, but might be part of the way of getting where you want to go.
Yeah, and so the reason I do that is
Yeah.
because when I say audit, like give an honest audit of your situation, I need to know if my goal is to create 11 streams, I need to know that I'm not capable of creating 11 streams. Like that is a part of my current situation that I need to solve. In the same way that if I'm trying to lose weight, I need to know that I don't understand how nutrition works. Like that is a thing that I need to be honest with myself about and make practical steps to change. Because in my mind, and again, this is all just what has worked for me, the only way you create change is to be honest about where you currently are. So that's why I included that, since it was relevant to the specific goal that I was focused on.
Okay.
Yes.
You got a book coming out?
Yeah. So
Tell us more about that.
it's the book is called Tiny Leaps Big Changes. It's going to be published through Hachette Book Group, and they will be putting it live in January 2019, assuming I make all the deadlines. So the purpose of the book is to take the similar format of the podcast, which is, again, what can you do next Tuesday to change your life? What are the experiences, the psychological factors, the neurochemical factors that affect your ability to take action every single day and to do the things that matter, and breaking that down from other people, but breaking it down from my own personal experience, and just sort of trying to be a student that shares his work with others.
Awesome.
How do you
Yes.
scale your podcast up quickly?
Say that again.
Have you say you got
Oh,
subscribers?
So prior to launching the show, I had been podcasting for about 2.5 years, so I knew a decent amount about how iTunes worked, but also good timing. So I launched the show on January 1st, which is an amazing time to launch anything self-help related. And in addition to all of that, I went daily for the first 6 months. So at the time I was self-employed and had the ability to wake up every morning and record an episode and then publish the episode that day. So I did that every day for 6 months and prioritize engaging with listeners. So one of the things that I did the first 2 months was an hour every single day where a listener could call me on the phone and I could talk to them. And so doing that, I learned what they cared about. I learned about birthdays and was able to do a shout out that day because I hadn't recorded yet. So just a lot of really like gritty work plus luck plus understanding how the algorithm works. Yes.
And what could you do next section? Like how do you have a system for prioritizing what that thing that you're gonna do next? So if yours is 11 streams of income, it's like, well, wait,
Right.
how do you prioritize that?
Yeah, so that's the part I haven't figured out. In full disclosure, I am terrible at prioritizing things. I tend to jump into things very quickly and then jump out of it very quickly if it's not working. So my method of prioritization has just been do it fast and see if anything clicks, and if not, then you go do the next thing. There's probably a much better way of doing that if you're not ADD ridden like I am, but that's just how I've been approaching it. Yes.
So last question.
Why do you find it necessary to put career and finances into two separate categories? What is the distinction that you see between the two of those things?
So career, in my mind, is the work that you do. So whether it's nonprofit work or volunteering or an actual job, like the work you do is your career, and the things you're trying to quote unquote have an impact on. And so finances, in my mind, aren't directly related to the work you do. So the 9 to 5, obviously, or any job, or most things, the work you put in will turn out an income. But there's also passive income, and there's also investing, and so the amount of money you make isn't always tied to the number of hours you work, and as a result, career and finances are separate things in my way of looking at it.
Makes sense.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, and again, pull up your podcast app and subscribe.